Yeah, I will throw a bone to the people who are disappointed right now, just because I do think what were a lot of reasons to think that we would be higher than
Yep.
the high 90s or 100K at this point in time. I think a
Yep.
lot of people are looking at themselves saying, wait a minute, we have the ETFs now, we have institutional adoption, we have Larry Fink promoting Bitcoin on mainstream TV, we have what is allegedly a pro Bitcoin administration. I'm going to be a pro Bitcoin president. Like all these things are like here. And I think most people are saying the price action is not reflecting those things.
Yeah.
But as a counterpoint to my own counterpoint, I would say that is the history of Bitcoin. And to a certain extent, that is the history of financial markets. There's no law that says the price at a particular moment in time of a stock, of a commodity, reflects the underlying fundamentals. In fact, you would say it's typically the opposite.
Yep.
I've made this point before, but I'll just make it quickly again. There's a college professor I had who said this to me for the first time when I was a young kid in a finance class and said, everyone look, I think we were looking at the physical newspaper at that point. I'm not even 40, but man, that makes me feel old because you weren't just like on your laptop and pulling up things easily. And
Yep.
he had us look at the 52-week trading range for a bunch of big stocks. It's usually a really wide range for companies that are like have very predictable business models that have been around for 50 years.
Yep.
And he was just like, there's a lot of noise in markets. And you can't really say that the fundamental value of these companies really was in this 52-week range. So I always remember that. I think it applies to Bitcoin as really any financial asset. And we'll get into it on the show. But in my humble opinion, I think the fundamentals for Bitcoin really are as strong as ever. The thesis is as strong as ever. And when I look back at what happened in November of 2021, that was the last Bitcoin peak,
Yep.
and then what led to that sell off all throughout 2022, I just don't see those conditions present right now. We'll get into it, but that's my current outlook.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, obviously. And I think that's true. If you did the chart of Bitcoin's fundamentals, right, it's up and to the right. There's probably some jumps when you get a huge on ramp like an ETF, there's a jump or something, but it doesn't go down. And it's always there in the bottom of a bear market. The fundamentals are the same as they were 6 months before that at the top of the bull market. And that's why we hodl. That's why we have that we developed that conviction in the fundamental value of Bitcoin. And that's why Bitcoin Amsterdam today was just, everybody was happy because we have faith in the fundamental value of Bitcoin, not just faith, but like an understanding, right? We thought this out. It doesn't require faith. It requires some work to study and understand what's happening here because it is based in logic, fact, in my opinion, that Bitcoin has much higher fundamental value than we're seeing here at $96,000 a coin.
Yeah. Yeah. In theory, there could be things that would change our thesis, right? Like there's a list of things that could happen that might change the Bitcoin thesis. Some sort of like major technical failure,
Yeah.
some sort of custodian failure, like on the if Coinbase fails, something crazy, right?
Even if Coinbase failed at this point, like it's just, they're not systemic anymore.
So it would not affect the Bitcoin network, right?
Yeah.
Individuals could
The
transact
fundamentals
the
wouldn't
same
change.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it would. Yeah. So if you're talking like long-term fundamentals, still wouldn't change, but it would spook people to the point
Yes.
where
Yeah.
people would be like, oh, I can't trust this. And
Yeah.
there would need to be like a rebuilding, right? That would be something that I would say, okay, there's going to be like a long bear market here as people digest what happened. Or if we got a sound money president who was like, we're
Right.
fixing the money supply, no more fractional reserve banking, balance
Yeah.
the budget, like that would actually be bad for Bitcoin. It's just that when I look at those potential like three big things,
Or
I don't think they're
SHA-256
happening.
gets broken, which
Yeah, yeah,
obviously is massive effects outside of Bitcoin as well, and the whole financial system and beyond, outside of finance as well, would be compromised. But yeah, that would have I guess a blow to Bitcoin's fundamentals. But we even have like solutions there. It would be messy, but you could hard fork into some quantum resistant algorithms which are out there and have been developed, and we can debate which one is the best. But in a situation like that, I'm pretty sure that the Bitcoin node runners would opt in for a hard fork.
yep, exactly. And yeah, even in these kind of very drastic scenarios that we're painting hypothetically here, it doesn't mean Bitcoin is like dead. But the point I wanted to make is just that None of those things are happening right now. Those are things that
Right,
would
right.
really test the Bitcoin thesis. None of those things are happening.
No,
So the thesis is intact, I think is fair to say.
for sure. Agreed.
The train is not stopping. This is Charlie Bolello, who puts out a lot of good macro stuff. The interest expense on the US national debt rose to 1.24 trillion in the last 12 months. This is through October 2025. The US federal government has a fiscal year that ends in September. So if you want to look up these stats on your own, if you see like the last fiscal year, you might get a different number than this because this is looking at trailing 12 months. But the idea here is that trailing 12 months interest expense, 1.24 trillion. That has more than doubled over the last 4 years. And the line item, the federal government, what we as a country spend on interest on the debt is now officially higher than national defense.
Does anyone actually think that this is okay? Like we're going to be able to pay it off. We're going to keep the thesis I hear now is we're going to grow out of it. That's our only chance at this point is AI sparks some insane growth over the next 2 decades to the point where we can pay off the debt. Is that even like just monetary? What was the name of MMT?
Modern monetary theory.
Don't they just basically say at this point like inflation's good, permanent inflation is just like the way it should be? Is that effectively like in a very simple way what they're saying?
Yeah, I hear a lot less from the MMTers these days. I don't know if it's because Stephanie Kelton and Moore and Mosler have both blocked me, so I can't see their content. But they seem to be in
nice
like
little badge
yeah,
for your collection.
they seem to be in a downward trend right now. I feel like they have their kind of flashes where you hear MMT a lot in the media. You just don't hear as much about it now. But they have made the case. I'm not being hyperbolic here. Stephanie Kelton has said that the government debt is just like a tracker of private savings. This is like manipulating words and people's minds off the charts.
Yeah.
That's what she tries to say, is that the government debt going up is just like the more debt you have, you're just adding money to the system, and that reflects people's private savings, and it's just fine. And they say, oh, the money's just like points on a scoreboard. And if the government, this is another phrase they use, massive euphemism, it's the government provisioning itself. That's what they say.
Okay.
All of this perpetual debt, it's just the government provisioning itself. And
that's a fantastic word. It
yeah,
means nothing, but it sounds important.
correct.
Yeah.
And they, not surprisingly, the people in the MMT world tend to be big government proponents because they support the government. They don't see this debt as a problem. I think if you got them to be honest, they would admit it's not going to be paid back in real terms, but they just say, yeah, this is how the government provisions itself.
Yeah.
But you obviously have a pretty big problem if the government provisioning itself is somewhat constrained by market forces when, if, as you suggested, buyers of treasuries out there are, I think they're slowly realizing that these things are not going to be paid back in real terms. A huge indicator of that, which we've talked about on this show probably 3 weeks ago or something.
Yeah.
Remember we showed the chart that showed the amount of 10 plus year maturity treasuries that the Fed holds?
Yes.
They have never reduced since 2008. They have not reduced that balance of treasuries. And I think the like dirty little secret is it's because other real buyers out there, pension plans, insurance companies, individuals, foreign nations, they don't want to hold a 10-year or a 30-year treasury.
Yep.
So even if you're an MMTer and you believe that this kind of stuff is okay, you're going to find yourself in a position where no natural buyer wants to buy the debt.
Yeah.
And then the Fed is just going to be buying it. And then you're into like basically direct money printing at that point.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So that's in the macro category. Nothing stops that train there. We got a tweet from Stephen Lubke here. Shout out, Stephen. So the Czech National Bank this week announced themselves, he's quote tweeting their account, they call it a $1 million investment. And to be clear, this is the Czech National Bank. They called it an investment. They also called it a test portfolio of digital assets based on blockchain. They bought Bitcoin in addition to some other tokens, I believe. But I think they're calling it a test portfolio because you have to remember, like, these are people, they don't really know how to do this. This is a new world in terms of how are they executing They had to go, this is a very official institution. This is the Czech National Bank. They had to go through what counterparties are we going to use? What are we going to do for custody? Who has access to these types of things? They have to, all these safeguards, right? And processes and protocols have to go into place. So it seems like they're doing what is a nominal amount for a country's central bank, $1 million. But this clearly seems to pave the way for them to get further involved in Bitcoin as time goes on. And as Steven says in his tweet here, this is the first I'm aware of it as well. I think this is the first time a central bank, right, not a commercial bank that bought Bitcoin for some various reason, or they're a market maker or something like that. This seems to be the first central bank that has made an allocation to Bitcoin.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. And it makes sense. If they're going to buy Bitcoin, they're not just going to buy $1 million of Bitcoin, right? Even if somebody were to question that it is a test transaction, they're putting into a test portfolio, you're not going to go buy $1 million worth of Bitcoin as a central bank and just not buy anymore. That does not make any sense. It makes perfect sense to test the waters a little bit. This is an asset that has final settlement, and you've got to. The same thing happens with companies that are buying huge amounts of Bitcoin. They do test transactions. They're not going and plowing all of their money earmarked for Bitcoin all at once in one transaction. They're testing out different custodians and developing relationships and figuring out the process, which is just due diligence effectively. So this is pretty cool. Yeah, I guess this is a landmark thing. The first national bank to come out and say publicly they bought some Bitcoin. And the implication, even if they haven't said it explicitly, is that they're going to buy more.
Yeah, I think we'll look back on this one day and say, yeah, that was a big deal. So yeah, this to me is also one of those things where it's like, if you told someone this in whatever, pick your year, 2018, 2015, that a central bank would buy $1 million of Bitcoin because they're getting familiar with the asset, you'd be like, oh yeah, the Bitcoin thesis is totally intact. Like, this is going to happen. People would have confidence that it was going to happen. But now it's like, we see it, or it feels like Bitcoin Twitter sees it and then just like moves on immediately, which is not appreciating how big of a deal it is.
Yeah, it used to be you'd get big news at a scale like this once a quarter or something like that. And before it was like, hey, we got written up in Wired magazine. That was a big deal. Or WikiLeaks were accepting Bitcoin. That was a massive deal. Yeah, as Satoshi said, it kicked the hornet's nest. It was a big deal. And now, yeah, you could see First National Bank in the world saying, hey, we've got some Bitcoin, it can be swept under the rug. It's just, Bitcoin is just so pervasive now, and news is out all the time. So we've become desensitized to it. We're like, it's only $1 million. Come on.
Yeah, for sure. There is like a disconnect between, I think, the people who are sold on the Bitcoin thesis and have been for years and have done your 1,000 hours or 10,000, whatever it is. We're always, oh, why are they only doing $1 million? Why are they the only central bank? There's a gap between reality and expectations. It will close eventually, but it takes time.